everyone, and welcome back to Teaching So Everyone Can Learn, a podcast from the Center for Faculty Excellence at New York Tech. I'm your host, Fikayo Edubemi, a faculty development specialist with the Center for Faculty Excellence. This season, we're exploring belonging and student success. What does it mean to belong on a college campus? And how can we, in our different roles, create spaces that support every student's sense of connection, identity, and growth? In this episode, I'm joined by Dr. Robert G. Alexander, a cognitive neuroscientist and vision researcher. He's currently an assistant professor of psychology and counseling on our New York City campus. Dr. Alexander leads the Human Factors and Neuroscience Lab, where his team explores what eye movement can reveal about a person. In the long term, Dr. Alexander aims to develop new educational tools based on his research. Dr. Alexander is also deeply committed to student mentorship, hands-on research training, and equitable education. He runs a large, engaged group of students, researchers, and he's intentional about building a lab culture where students feel like they truly belong. He's also the faculty advisor for New York Tech's First Generation Students Club, which places him at the front lines of conversations around belonging in the academy, especially for first-gen students navigating higher education. Dr. Alexander, I'm so excited to have you here with us. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. So we're going to start with you telling us a little bit about what you teach and how long you've been here at New York Tech.
This is the end of my second year. So I'm in the psychology and counseling department. I teach undergraduate psychology courses. And quite a wide variety of them. The introductory courses to the more advanced level ones, introduction to psychology, abnormal psychology, clinical cognitive psychology, physiological basis of behavior, and a supervised research course where I work with students kind of one-on-one to do independent research projects.
That's interesting. So that means you do spend quite a bit of time with undergraduates and like interacting with them, learning about them.
I spend most of my time with undergraduates,
yeah. Very cool. So you're the perfect person for this conversation. So I would love to start with asking you how you define belonging in your classroom.
Yeah, so to me, belonging is the feeling of being accepted and valued and connected to the group. And you know, that involves like a sense of feeling secure and kind of safe in that space, feeling included, and like you have a shared identity with other people. So in the classroom, feeling like you belong is feeling like you should be in that class, like you're a part of that class, like you're a valued member of that class, and that you're recognized and supported in what you're doing. And to me, that's very important because, you know, students, if they don't feel any of those things, they're not going to be engaged, they're not going to be motivated, they're not going to be successful in the classroom. And, you know, our whole purpose is having them learn. So if they're completely checked out, that's not going to facilitate that goal at all.
That's such a great point, because if the students don't feel like they're a part of the classroom community, right? Like they're not as interested or they're not as motivated to do the work. So it's important that we are making effort to cultivate that sense of belonging with them.
And you can imagine, like, if you don't feel like the instructor recognizes you and wants to support you, you're going to be less likely to go to them for help when you need help. You're going to be less likely to kind of persist through whatever challenges you're having with the class. You're not going to be as likely to participate actively. All of the things.
Exactly. And as you say this, I'm also curious about how you came to this definition of what it means to belong in a classroom.
That's a good question. I mean, over time, I've worked with very diverse populations of students and colleagues and in my research participants. So I've had to explain different topics to many different people from different backgrounds. And I've seen how much it matters really when someone just doesn't feel like they click with things. So I've had plenty of students who, for example, they maybe if they're struggling in their first year classes, they feel like, oh, maybe I don't belong in college, right? Even though we accepted them because we believe that they can thrive here, right? We would not have accepted them unless we felt like they belonged. But if they're struggling and they don't see that everyone else is struggling and they don't, or they're struggling more because they face different sets of difficulties, um, and that's not acknowledged, then they're just left feeling like, okay, well, I shouldn't be here, so I'm going to not try as hard or just quit, right? Um, and I've seen that happen a number of times where students, if they're coming from a less privileged background where their parents, I mean, my parents both went to college, right? So I came in, I didn't need help on I didn't do my FAFSA, my parents did my FAFSA. I didn't have to go through all of these things. My parents could tell me like to go to the registrar or the bursar or whatever office, like I had directions from my personal support group. Um, Most of my friends were doing the same things, and I could get information from them. But other students, like they just feel completely lost, and that's tough. Like if you're coming in as an international student or a first generation student, or if you are not as prepared because your high school was less resourced, or you're like at the lower end of our cutoffs for things, right? It's very easy to get lost. And I've seen the negative side of that, and I've seen the positive side of like making it clear to those same students, like, no, this is not you. This is you have to learn how to navigate the system. Like I didn't do great in my first year and I'm doing just fine now. Like you can turn things around. You just have to know who to talk to, how to talk to them, what you need to do. You have to try different approaches to studying, like all of those things. But if you don't know that, you just kind of again check out and then everything kind of stops.
That's such a great point because you're so right, because students do come in, particularly with New York Tech and our huge first generation student population. Is a lot of them, this is the first time they're ever in a system like this. They're not used to self-advocating, they're not used to knowing like where to go to for help. They're also
Yeah.
like living in their own heads where they think they are the only one struggling in this specific way, which also makes it difficult to like reach out and know what to do because you're like, oh, I'm the only one. And that means I shouldn't have come in here. I'm an imposter, blah, blah, blah. So it's such a good point to be like, I'm going to make an effort to make all my students feel like they're supposed to be here. And it's completely normal to feel lost, which is why I'm here. I'm here to help you navigate the system. And I'm going to guide you through that.
Yeah, I can pretty much guarantee that if let's say you're a faculty member that's listening to this, there's someone in your class who is struggling and is not coming to your office hours to talk to you because they feel like it's entirely their fault that they're struggling. They think maybe you don't like them. They they're too anxious to go to office hours, or they don't realize that they can just go to your office or connect with you on Zoom and say like, I am struggling and don't know why, please help. They feel like they need specific questions and they don't know what questions to ask, right? Like there is for sure someone in every class that feels that way. And if you don't clarify those things, then that's where they end up. And then they're failing the class not because they didn't put in their all, not because they didn't try, not because they're incapable of the topic, but because they just don't know some of those details that the more successful students already learned or were told or just happen to in some cases, they're just confident enough that they kind of plow through it on their own, but not everybody is.
That's such a great point. And this leads me to my next question, which is then what are some specific things that you do to help students feel like they're a part of a learning community?
I try to do a lot, honestly. I like work to make my syllabus kind of warm and inviting. I I do a pre-course survey. So like before the class even starts, I reach out by the Canvas system and say like, hey, welcome to the course. Like I'm Dr. Alexander. Like if you haven't met me before, this is a little bit about me. I can you fill out this survey because it'll give me information about you as a student so that I can like make sure that you understand the context and like if they do the survey along the way, I ask questions like, what can I do to support you? I do want to support your learning. And then they know that like I actually want to do that. So even just being told that I think helps, but that also gives me an opportunity to do things like ask how their names are pronounced in a way that's not going to make them feel out of place by like trying hard to pronounce their name 8 or 9 times in the middle of class, right? So right off the bat, I try to set things up so that everyone is included in the process and knows that I'm trying to do that. And then along the way, I check in with students. I do like a mid-semester feedback where again, I ask the same kind of things like, are you struggling? If you're struggling, do you know that you can come to my office hours and talk to me about it? Because again, if I ask you that question, even if you're like, no, I didn't know that, presumably now you know that. And I do try to also just be as clear with guidelines as possible to make sure that everyone's on the same page. And I try to be as flexible with grading as I can be while keeping everything rigorous, so that when people do face their own personal difficulties, like it's already accounted for, and they don't have to feel like it's something that they're doing wrong in a particular way. It's just like, no, everybody gets this flexibility, so it's cool.
Mm-hmm,
This isn't
mm-hmm.
just for you. This is the thing that we do in this class.
Excellent. And it does sound like you're kind of towing this like balance between being flexible, but also like designing from the bottom up. You're like, oh, how can I think about the most extreme situation? Like, okay, if a student that can't make it to class in these 2 weeks, how can I build that into the design of my course? But at the same time, you're asking for their perspective at the beginning of the semester so that you're able to like make changes and account for certain things even before the semester starts, which is such a delicate dance. So I'm curious about how you're able to like intentionally build this concept of belonging into the design of your activities and your assignments and your syllabus and maintain this dance while also like keeping to rigor and making sure like the students are being academically challenged.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly times when I can't do as much as I'd like to in one direction or the other. But there are things like, okay, if I say that I drop the grade from one assignment, period, um, then I don't have to be the person who decides whether a student's excuse is valid enough to warrant dropping their particular grade. I just say everybody loses one. So you don't have to come to me and say like so and so died and I'm grieving, or I just couldn't wake up. I could not get out of bed today because of mental health issues or because I had the flu or whatever. Like
Mhm.
everybody gets a dropped score from that part of the grade. So that kind of removes it from me, and also in the same breath, like makes it clear that everyone is getting the same treatment, and it allows for difficulties that they may be facing. So that's one thing I do that seems to work pretty well. Sometimes it comes down to stuff like I find out in advance that, oh, this student is commuting from New Jersey and it takes them 2 hours to get here, and they're also working a full-time job outside of classes and or however many hours a week, like they know that it's a problem for them. Um, and if I know those things, then I can sort of keep an eye on them. And even just checking in with the student and saying like, hey, how is it going? Like, I know that you have this particular like challenge. Have you been able to do this and that and the other thing? And if not, then we can talk about it and address it. As opposed to the student coming to you at the very end of the semester and saying, "Hey, I failed your class. Here's the reason why. What can we do about it?" To which the answer is nothing, because you failed the course, and you can't just make that up suddenly at the end. If you're missing every class and not completing the projects and doing poorly on the tests, you can't do anything about that. But if you know from the very beginning, like this student has specific challenges and they need to work on that, but I know that that's what's going on,
Hmm.
then whatever flexibility I am able to offer, I can offer them right off the bat, which lets them be able to do their best, as opposed to, again, like at the end of the semester, there is no amount of flexibility that would that would solve that. But if early on I said, like, okay, it's fine for you to have extensions here and there, do things on time when you can, but when you can't, like, I understand your situation. I'll let you know if there's any that you can't have extensions on. That gives them sort of a little freedom to do the things in a way that works for them, and then they build up momentum and they complete all the tasks.
Exactly. It sounds like you are putting safeguards so that you catch problems early on and then you're able to adapt to that very quickly versus
Yeah,
like waiting to the end, which is like a typical student like format, isn't it? It's like you wait until the last minute and you're like, oh no, what can we do? Like, there's nothing we can do now. But since you're upfront, like preparing them to be able to, like, for you to catch them early on, for also for them to be able to like alert to you quickly, like, oh, I can't do this right now. What support is there for me? What flexibility is there for me? I
yeah,
think that's like very incredible and important work to do. Um, I know you talked about dropping like the lowest assignments for all students. I'm also curious if there are other types of assignments or activities that you found especially effective with designing belonging into your course.
yeah. So what really works well for the sort of thing I just described is if you can include a lot of quizzes along the way or a lot of assignments where you're able to assess their learning throughout the course, as opposed to just, your grade is based on two exams, one in the middle and one at the end, and I therefore have no idea if you're struggling until at least halfway through the semester.
Mhm.
Um, so that's one thing. Another is just in my experience, students are very sensitive about grades that are subjective in any way. So
Mm.
if you, which a lot of our grades are, right? So if there's a paper assignment and the rubric says you have to do XYZ thing, but like 40% of it is just like, did you do a good job? Based on my subjective opinion of it. Or class participation grades, for example, are you could do class participation in a very objective way where people get points if they raise their hand and you're recording that. Or like people get points if they turned in the in-class activity, right? Which I do. But in many courses, it's just like my subjective opinion of whether this student participated or not. And the minute you have anything where it seems subjective to the student and they don't get a perfect score, first of all, they're going to fight you on that. But second, um, they feel like you're giving them a lower score because you don't like them. And when we assign these things, we don't usually think about it that way, but it's true. And if you ask the especially undergraduate students, if you ask them like if you had this sort of vague assignment where it didn't have a rubric and it was just like the instructor gave people scores based on how well they think they did, and you got like a 90 instead of 100, or you got a 70 instead of a 80, and you don't know why, are you going to assume that it's because the instructor hates you? And they'll say yes. Like absolutely 100%. I don't feel like they like it. Which is not great. And it's certainly not what we're trying to convey. So one thing that I do in my courses is I make more challenging parts of the course very objectively scored. So, for example, exams that focus on like multiple choice questions or ones where there is a correct answer and that's all you get points for. And if you don't get it correct, you lose all the points, right? As
Mm.
opposed to, again, like an essay question where it's kind of a little free form on the grading. So I have the place where people tend to lose the most points in my classes are very objective. And then anything that's fairly subjective, I tell the students, I'm like, I'm going to grade this very generously.
Mm.
But like you have to do the assignment, you have to do XYZ thing, but as long as you do that, you'll get all the points for this. The place where your grade is going to suffer is if you don't do the assignments or if you don't study for the exams and do well on the exams and that kind of thing. And the end result is that when they do poorly on anything, they understand why. And they know that it's not because we have like a poor relationship in some way. So that kind of leaves a little more opportunity for me to say, like, no, I am trying to support you. I do want you to come to me if you have an issue, and they're going to be a little more willing to do that.
That's such a great point because you're basically saying I'm communicating very clearly to you about how to do well in this course. And every like I have a rubric, I'm telling you how I'm going to grade your paper versus how I'm grading your multiple choice. So that by the end of the day, when they do receive their grades, they're like, okay, I knew what to do. And I was very much aware because all of this information was given to me and explained very clearly. So, and I know
Yeah.
what to do in a situation where I feel like I can't succeed. I know that I can go up to my professor and ask for help.
Yep, that's the idea.
That's excellent. And for you, I think like Dr. Alexander is really interesting because I've seen how you interact with your students and you have your lab. So you are very close to your students and you have a really good relationship with them where they feel comfortable like telling you when things are not going well or when they need help or when they need support. So I'm curious about how you're able to take your student voice or feedback into your teaching and how are you creating space for that and how is it shaping the way that you teach?
Yeah, so you mentioned a few things there that are probably worth talking about. One is that I do bring students into my scholarship, and that helps a lot in
Mm-hmm.
terms of having any kind of relationship with the students that can help them feel supported and understood and so on. Obviously, I can't do that for every student, but I know that my experience as an undergraduate was that because I had that research experience, I got to know the faculty in the department really well. Even not just the person I was working with, but because I was spending time in my department, I got to know the other faculty in the department. I got to know anyone that we were collaborating with, right? So I made all of these more personal but still professional connections. That let me sort of really get involved in the field. And I do try to bring that to my students. The ones that work with again, the ones that work with me, we do spend a lot of time working on various tasks together. And they come in not knowing how to do anything. So it's a lot of me giving them one-on-one mentoring and discussion, and they have to learn how to take critique from me and that kind of thing. And so we do end up having to talk about how to take critique and to understand that yes, no, I am trying to support you and so on. And at the end of that, once they've been working with me for a while, like they are generally more willing to share with me, like, yes, these are the things that I'm struggling with. These are the things that I find helpful about your course or difficult about your course or about other people's courses, right? Like, not that I'm bad mouthing other instructors or letting them do that to me, but they will tell me like these are things that I have difficulty with, and it helps that I just like hear about that. uh, it saves me the trouble of reading an awful lot of articles describing the student experience. I just get our students' experiences from them directly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I
Mm-hmm.
have some notion of like, yeah, these are the practices they like or don't like. Now, the fact that they don't like something doesn't necessarily mean I wouldn't do it. But it's good to know what kinds of things they struggle with and how they try to push past, or when they can't push past, like why couldn't they? that sort of thing.
Yeah, it sounds like you're getting like the juiciest information that you can possibly get because they trust you. So they're able to tell you like, oh, this is what I don't like, oh, this is what I'm struggling with in this other class. And you're able to use that information in a critical way for your own class. Like, okay, and that's the other thing with students too, is they are not the experts in knowing what works for them in like
Yes.
how they should be taught. But they're the experts in how they are receiving, how they are being taught. So it's also a way of like, okay, you don't like this, but that's good for you. How can I communicate to you why it's good for you, even if you don't like it? And how can I like coach you through the discomfort of going through this like really difficult teaching moment? But like
Yeah.
letting you know that it's important for you to go through these difficult teaching moments.
Yeah, absolutely. And they 100% don't like whether they like an instructor or not and whether they like a method or not is 100% not based on whether they're learning effectively from it. It's
Exactly.
it's based on all the other factors. And we want them to learn effectively, so we're going to do whatever the effective teaching practices are. But when it does challenge them in particular ways, it's nice to know that and be like, yes, no, this is difficult for some students for these reasons. And so sometimes there's ways that we can adjust for that a little bit, where it's like, okay, um, some people don't like I don't have a great example off the top of my head, but if I assigned a project and really all I want for them to do is show me that they've learned the material, and I know that having them do it in a particular way is going to be more difficult for them, but not better,
Mhm.
just harder, then I don't have to assign it in that way. Or I can give them options potentially. So you've probably heard about universal design for learning. Like
Mhm.
the idea is you're if you give students multiple ways to complete an assignment, then they can pick the one that works best for them, and that allows for differences in how students learn, differences in their backgrounds, differences in the resources they have available. But as long as the different options are roughly equal in how, again, rigorous and effective they are, then why not do it that way? But
Exactly.
but you need to know that there may be a difficulty there. If you have an assignment and you're like, everyone will do great at this, and if they don't, it's because they didn't try. Um, then you're kind of stuck. Like that's all you're going to do for them, period. And again, we do that a lot. I do that a lot. I don't know the answer to everything. I'm sure I give them assignments that they're not thrilled with and that aren't optimized in any particular way. Um, but hearing from them what works and what doesn't is helpful. Um, and I do think you don't have to have this sort of close research relationship with them to make that work. Just asking mid-semester feedback questions like if you ask a student, what do you like about my class that you think I should keep doing? What do you not like that I should change? What is a challenge for you in this course? What could I do slightly differently that would accommodate your needs and help you get past any difficulties, right? That's like 5 questions. You can throw that on a Google form, make it anonymous, and share it with the class and get that feedback immediately. Like spend 5 minutes of class time having them fill out this form, and then you'll suddenly be able to know what students appreciate or not in the middle of the semester, so that on the fly you can like adjust if it's easy to adjust, which sometimes it is.
Mhm.
Where, for example, um, I base my slides on around learning objectives, but I wasn't really sharing those learning objectives at the beginning of each lesson with the students. I was just putting them in a study guide that they would review at the end. Um, and the students made clear to me, like, no, it's helpful to have that along the way for some of the students. Like some of them would study the whole way through the semester, which is great, but they appreciated having like the bullet pointed, these are the things I want you to know specifically, um, as opposed to just asking them to learn everything in the lecture, which admittedly the whole lecture was based around the around those points, but having it made it explicit, they felt like it helped and supported them in the way that they prefer to study. And it cost me nothing to add that. Like I already had the bullet points, I already had the learning objectives. I just had to stick them in my slides and then share that. And just the fact that they told me to do that, I could make that change in 5 minutes mid-semester, and everyone appreciated it and saw that I was it. And then you can announce in class, like, hey, I got all of your feedback. These are the things I'm taking, like I take it all seriously. Some of these things I'm not changing. Here's why I'm not changing them. It's because of your learning. Some of the things I'm changing, here are the things I'm changing because you asked me to change them, and I'm happy to do it. And then they know that, again, you care and you're hearing them out and trying to support them, and that's an easy way to do things. And the Center for Teaching and Learning has the mid-semester feedback system that can support you with that. Again, if you don't want to go through that, I just use Google Forms. Is straightforward and easy. It takes very little of my time, and I do think that even just asking them for feedback, they appreciate, and it's a signal to them that I'm trying to support them in their learning.
Yes. And I think also that transparency for students goes such a long way because the older you get, like even when you're a child, you want to know why you're doing specific things. And I think
Yes.
like for students, when you explain like, oh, this is why we're doing it, like, oh, and it means more to them, like, okay, now I'm more motivated to do this one activity because I know the reasoning behind it. I know I'm not just doing like a bunch of random quizzes for the sake of doing quizzes. I know like this is baked into the course in service of me like doing the exam really well. So just that simple transparency, like these are your learning objectives, and this is why, like this is how it's connected to the lecture materials and how you're going to do on the and like the kinds of questions that are coming out in your exams and in your tests goes such a long way for students.
That kind of transparency is helpful, but also like telling them your motivations for the course is helpful. So many of us get up at the start of the semester and just say, like, here's the stuff I'm going to teach you, and then start teaching. And if you tell them why, like, why is it this topic important? Why is it important to you? Again, like I give a pre-course survey, so I know the kinds of career goals that many of the students have, and then I can say a thing or two about how the topic connects with their dream career, and then they're starting off the semester knowing like this is why I should care about this topic. And all I did differently there was be transparent about it and ask them for a little information about themselves. Um, but just like opening the course with like I am trying to support your learning, and just explicitly telling them that that's why I'm there, and that I'm not just there to sort of throw information at them and hope for the best. uh, we all know that we all care about the students and want to support them and want to see them learn. And like we're happier when our students all get the material and work hard at it and figure it all out. I feel like students don't always know that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
it does help them to hear that.
Yes.
They're like, yes, I do care about you as a student.
Exactly. It goes a really long way.
I mean, if you stop and think about instructors that were the best instructors you ever had, or the instructors that were the most meaningful in changing your life in any particular way, and you stop and just reflect on it for a minute, you'll realize like pretty much all the time, those people are people who they cared about you as a person.
Yes.
And so just again, like telling students like, yes, no, I recognize that you're an individual. You're not just a face in the background of my class. You're an individual who I want you to succeed in your career. Like you're here because you have a goal in mind. That goal might be I'm hoping to graduate college, or I want to go in this particular career path, or much of the time both. But like I'm here to support that, and I want to see you thrive in it. Just making that explicit can make a huge difference to them.
Perfectly said. I think you have articulated it so well. So now we're going to shift gears like very slightly, and I'm curious about you've talked a lot about how you're doing this work, but how have you experienced challenges in doing this work of like designing classrooms that create a sense of belonging in students, right? So what kinds of challenges have you experienced and what have you learned from those challenges?
The biggest challenges that I continue to face are that there are some students that I don't know why they're struggling, but they're clearly struggling. That don't show up to class, that don't do the assignments, that no matter how much I'm reaching out to them, it's not being effective. And I don't know why. But that I think happens a little less than it used to because of these measures that I'm taking. So that has helped. Um, but I mean, it's never going to be perfect, unfortunately. Um, I try to include everyone, but some students are still left behind because of some reason or another, that things just don't click, or they're having too much of a personal life difficulty where they're not able to sort of pull together for the semester. Um, and I'm mostly just hoping that that doesn't derail them from doing well the following semester.
Mm. So what are you doing now? So is there any system in place for you to like, so you can do the work of bringing the students back, but are there external resources or external departments that you redirect the students to, or you like alert to like, oh, this student is really struggling. I don't know how to support them, but I think you can support them.
Yeah, I mean, we have the early alert system that I do use, and I'll submit an alert, and then we have people that reach out to them. But again, like if I'm reaching out to them and they're reaching out to them, and the student is still just not opening up about what the issue is, and they're saying,
Mm.
"Oh yeah, no, I know, I have to do these things. I'm gonna do these things," and then they don't do the things. Um, there's not much you can do. And I respect that. Like there are always going to be points beyond which I can't um, intercede with them. But yeah, no, I'll direct students whenever appropriate to the counseling and wellness center. We have a lot of supports in place for students, and I'll point them to the relevant ones. And if I don't know what the issue is, I make sure that they have the list of the list of resources. Um, and that does help sometimes, I'm sure. I've had students tell me that they did um, start going to therapy, for example, because I put them in touch with the counseling center on some
Mm.
previous. And so providing that information does actually help in some cases. I do my best.
No, you really do. And I think it's such a great point to also highlight that, like, ultimately, students are people themselves and they have a lot of autonomy and agency. And as much as we can provide these resources and provide the support systems, they also have to meet us in the middle and do the work. Like, we
Yeah.
can't put our like we can't turn them into puppets and then make them do stuff. Ultimately, they also have to show up every day. They have to submit the assignments. They have to speak up when asked, like if there's an issue. They have to follow through. So it is very much like a two-way street of like both of us are in this moment together, and we have to bring our best selves, or at least bring our present selves into the moment. So that's I think like it's really important to touch on that of like, oh, not every time are we able to support students because for whatever reason the student themselves isn't able to bring themselves fully into the supports that are available.
Yeah.
You also spoke about this a little bit at the top about like your own experience as an undergraduate, and how that has shaped the way that you teach. But I'm curious about what personally motivates you to do this work, not necessarily as like a teacher, but as a person.
The work of trying to include everyone.
Yes, of being an inclusive educator.
I'll be kind of honest here and say that I know very clearly very explicitly that I benefited from people not being inclusive. Like coming from a very privileged background. I know, again, very explicitly, and I'm not going to tell the story, but very explicitly that like I would not be a scientist if it wasn't for sexism, for
Mm,
example. Um, th there were very clear things that was like, oh, this is not great and not okay. And I got into the field because of these reasons. And, I don't think that's fair or appropriate. And I don't think that other people should be kept out for the reasons that I was brought in. So part of it is me kind of trying to make up for the yeah, I mean, I don't have a great way to phrase this, but it's very much like I have seen the injustices in the system, and I've seen it affect people very negatively, and I don't like that. None of us like that. I think it it has personally motivated me to try to do the best I can for our students, irrespective of their backgrounds. Um,
mm,
in psychology, I'm very fortunate that many of our students are women, and so just by trying to include everyone, I do end up supporting women in going into STEM and doing all the biomedical things that I've seen people excluded from. Um, but I do try to make an extra effort to make sure that I'm being fair and equal, and it's kind of interesting from a research sort of perspective. Um, the systems that we have for advancing and promoting people through the system, and this is true in academia in general, but I think especially for research, there's a lot of informality in the process. So, and that often leads to bias. So, for example, a lot of people, the way that they get research assistants is they know who in their class is showing up to class on time, very motivated, doing all the assignments, doing the best thing, and so you go to like the students that you consider the best students and ask them to join your lab and work with you. And that makes sense. And it's great. Like it sounds merit-based, but like, do you always feel that the best students are the ones that are actually the best? Or are you sort of connecting more with some students because they look like you and act like you? And you think they're more engaged in class because they're doing the behaviors that your culture practices when they're paying attention. um, not everyone approaches class the same way, and I've often seen many, especially the more intensely research-based an institution is, the more I've seen things like, oh, everyone in this lab seems to be Norwegian or whatever. And it's like, okay, that's a little odd. And if you look at each individual case of why the person was brought into the group, it's like, no, it makes sense. Like, I know why this happened, but also, like, it does seem extremely biased, and it's hard to get away from that sort of thing.
mm. That's such an interesting like origin story of like you saw firsthand how like a system that isn't as inclusive can leave people out, even though you benefited from that system. But you were like, something about this is not right. How can I, when I'm within the system, then begin to correct some of those wrongs? And I think that's such a fantastic origin story of like, no, I'm here to reorient like the norm because the norm is leaving so many people who will be excellent like scientists, who will be excellent
Yeah.
psychologists out because it's become like a world where we're so used to like a very specific type of culture and a very specific type of person. But how can I then be more intentional about bringing in more perspectives and bringing in more like types of people into the field? So I think that's an incredible origin story to have.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of unfortunate that it's work that has to be done. But yeah. I mean, there's always stuff like people arguing that like if you are in graduate school, you shouldn't work for a female mentor because they get cited less. And it's like,
Mm.
okay, well, but like if everyone actively doesn't work for a woman mentor, then the woman mentor now has less resources than the male mentors, and like that's part of why they're getting more citations and more papers out and so on. So the system that we have and the way that we talk about it and the way that we work with it, unfortunately propagates some of this stuff. And I think if we're not kind of all actively working against it, it just keeps on going, which is not good.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm so happy that we were able to like kind of talk about that and explore that a little bit. For somebody, a fellow faculty member or a staff member in an institution who's curious about like how can I start thinking about cultivating a culture of belonging, but I don't know where to start. What's one thing you recommend for them to try? What's one small shift that they could do?
So one good if you don't have back-to-back classes where you're constantly running to and from them, if you can spare a couple minutes before or after class, one thing that helps a lot is to just go up to a student and kind of check in with them. Uh, if you start at the beginning of the semester and say like, hey, I'm gonna try every day to like talk to a person one-on-one. So it's like I'm not just singling you out for no reason, right? But like, oh, hey, your name is such and such, right? What major are you? Like, what are you? You don't. It's fine if you don't know this yet, but do you have like specific career goals? What are you trying to go into? Oh, you're a first year student. How's it going so far? Right? Like if you just sort of have a conversation about what they're aiming towards and what how things are going,
Mhm.
um, then that'll help you remember their name. It'll help you remember what's relevant to them, and it gives you right off the bat at least a little bit of a one-on-one connection that then makes them feel more included. And it again doesn't take a lot of effort. It does require time, which we don't always have for people that don't have time, and for everyone really, I do recommend getting mid-semester feedback some way, shape, or form, um, and trying to make it clear that you do care about them. Because I know everyone cares about them, but
Mhm.
making it clear, like explicit, is helpful in many cases, making it clear that you do want them to learn, right? And that you are there to get them to their goals. I think
Mhm.
they generally appreciate coming from anyone.
Yes. No, that's a fantastic point. And I think like even doing that small thing of just reaching out to like talking to one student, one, I think they will probably spread the gospel to their other classmates, like, oh, did you know that this our professor is like in this way? And it humanizes them for you, but it also humanizes you to them. And they're like, oh, did you know our professor like is interested in this thing or like said this funny thing to me? And that can do such a huge, it can make such a big impact of like changing even the energy of the classroom, and it feels more friendly and more warm, and then they can start showing up and like be more present in the classroom.
Yeah, there's also just like students seeing you having some sort of connection with any of the students in the class kind of make them feel like they have more of a connection with them, even though that doesn't necessarily make sense. But there's research showing that this is the case, that like if you know a reasonable proportion of the names of students in the class, like you don't have to know everybody's name, but if you know a lot of them, everyone in the room will think that you know their name, even though
Mm.
you don't. So having some visible connection, having some um, visible actions where you're identifying that you respect them as individuals kind of makes everyone in the room feel included, even if you don't call them out specifically. It's like if you're talking about, oh, so and so, you're a pre-med student, in your field, this and that, and this topic is more relevant to this other student because they're going into computer science. Like if you say those kinds of things and make it clear that you're trying to make things relevant two people, everyone feels kind of welcome. Just so if you can't connect with everyone, try to connect with a few students, and you'll find that it does generally help.
Yeah, express the vibe. So we're going to go into the wrap-up segment where I'll ask you about five rapid fire questions, where you can give our listeners with a few practical ideas. So my first question is, what is one thing you do in the first week of class to set the tone for belonging?
Again, I do a pre-course survey, so even before the start of the class, I try to set that that tone, and then I refer to that on the first day and invite everyone who hasn't done it yet to still do it. Um, and I try to make my syllabus as warm a tone as possible, as inclusive a tone, where I'm not like telling them, I'm not demanding things of them. I'm telling them what would be helpful for them as a person, as opposed to like, you absolutely must do XYZ thing.
Mm.
Um, so just and trying to make my expectations clear.
What is one way you check in with students throughout I mean, you kind of talked about this, but what is one way you check in with students throughout the semester?
Again, if I know which students especially need me to check in with them, I make sure to do that. I actually set calendar reminders, and I'm
Mm.
like, okay, this student said they have a difficult commute and they're working two jobs. So maybe by week 3, I should like talk to them specifically and be like, hey, how's it going? Right? So if I'm going to talk to a student before or after class that day, that's the student that I'm going to make sure that I speak with. Um, and again, that I haven't yet. That does seem to help.
Mhm.
Just having like made sure that the ones who I know are going to have some sort of challenge, um, understand that I'm thinking about that, whether or not I do anything differently because of it.
What's one strategy you've tried that surprised you but really worked?
Honestly, again, just like greeting one student before class, like it feels like making one or two connections, because by the end of a month, I've spoken to what, 8 students maybe, and the class is much bigger than that. But I have seen that that seems to really make a difference for the whole class. Like you said, kind of spreading the vibe around. So just making a few connections in the class when I can does seem to help create that sort of a supportive relationship with the entire group in a way that works much better than I expected.
What's one small shift that had a big impact?
The smallest, easiest thing I did was the mid-semester feedback survey. So just again, I think that the Center for Teaching and Learning suggested these particular questions to me at some point, but it was like, what do you like about this course that I should keep doing? What do you not like that I should stop doing? What else do you think I should add that I'm not currently doing? Like those 3 questions alone can make a big difference because uh, in making sure that I am capturing sort of what things I'm doing are actually supportive or not. Again, whether or not they are addressing learning outcomes is a different issue. So I have to keep that in mind also. But in identifying which things the students actually appreciate is helpful because of stuff like maybe I'm spending a lot of time on something that they really don't care about. And it's good to know that because then I can focus my energy on something that is just as supportive of learning, but is helping them a lot more.
What's one reminder you keep coming back to when you have challenges in the classroom?
I think about the successes that my students are having. They're really often doing great. They work so hard, so many of them. They're ambitious. They get a lot done. They're trying their best, and it often really pays off. And that does for sure help me deal with the challenges that come up. It's like, no, I know that many of these students are going to succeed and they're going to do amazing things. And that just feels great.
That's amazing because they are like, I think that every time I interact with a student, I'm like, you are so interesting and incredible. And I wish like you knew just how cool and like interesting you are because it will probably help you a whole lot if you knew this information that I knew about you. So that's such a great point of like, I know you're going to do well. I know like a lot of you are going to do really well. So I'm going to keep working hard to make sure that you do like meet that success and you do like excel in whatever field you end up in.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Alexander, for speaking with me and for sharing your perspective. This has been such a great conversation, and I hope that our listeners got something, a thing or two that they can, use in their work or something they can reflect on, something they can think about. And yeah, such a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. This was great.